So I'm going to read to you from Ecclesiastes chapter 1. And it says this, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What advantage does man have in all his work which he does under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. Also the sun rises and the sun sets, and hastening to its place it rises there again. Blowing towards the south and then turning towards the north, the wind continues swirling along, and on its circular courses the wind returns. All the rivers flow into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place where the rivers flow, there they flow again. All things are wearisome. Man is not able to tell it. The eye is not satisfied with it, with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is that which will be, and that which has been done is that which will be done. So there is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one might say, see, this, it is new? Already it has existed for ages, which were before us. There is no remembrance of earlier things, and also of the latter things which will occur. For there will be for them no remembrance among those who will come later still. Are you depressed? Do you feel sad? There is nothing new under the sun, and it's all a waste and pointless. Do you know this book I discovered of Ecclesiastes is read at the Feast of Tabernacles? And it's quite surprising, because the Feast of Tabernacles is kind of a harvest celebration. It's where they are rejoicing over things. I thought, what a book to read out. That's going to put a dampener on the festivities, if ever I heard anything. But it is a joyful thing. It's the book that cults and false religions home in on, because there are some very strange statements in there. But you've got to understand the context of the book and the author. And I can't think of anyone else who it could be to write this book, really, because as you read the whole of it, you can see certain characteristics of King Solomon. He seems to be, though, at this point in his life, quite cynical and extremely pessimistic, like he's lost much of his faith. And so immediately you can understand that it explains a lot of the statements that he makes in these verses, and we are not meant to take them as rules and regulations and principles for our Christian life, but they are there to show us what a life is like without God. What life is like without God. When you feel that God has let you down, when you feel that God is not there. Now, I don't know about your past year, but as I've said, this is our last Sunday in our church year, and we're about to start our new one, and we're looking forward to the vision that we have, and that is still unknown. That is still uncertain. We have a vision. We've got no idea how that will work. We've got no idea what that actually looks like. But do you know something? We said that 12 months ago when we had the vision for this forthcoming year, and we got no idea how that was going to pan out. But we now have a testimony of exactly how it has. There was an American preacher that said this about Ecclesiastes 1:9, the nothing new under the sun. And he said, here is a man, in other words, the cynic, for whom life has obviously grown stale. He's suffered heavy and tragic losses. Among these, surely one of the most pathetic is actually his loss of his New Year's Day. If you take this as our New Year's Day, the start of something new, looking forward, he'd lost the joy in the new start. It never brought him any thrill of expectancy. It never resurrected any hopes. It never brought a revival of courage so that he could strive to do his best. He didn't allow himself to be betrayed into it by making rash resolutions and saying, oh, I'm going to do this year and I'm going to do this year, because all he could see was that it was all pointless. It was only the beginning of another year of boredom, another year of yawns, another year of disgust and despair, of wearily trudging through a monotonous waste of desert sand. I wonder if that could be said of any of us here this morning. Whether we're one of God's people or not, it's irrelevant really in the light of God's truth today. Could it be said that we stand on the threshold of this new church year, but it's only the beginning of another year of boredom, another year of yawns, another year of disgust and despair, another year of trudging wearily through a mound of desert sand. He saw so much of life that he didn't like, that he couldn't understand, that he couldn't make head nor tail of, that he became very cynical. Solomon uses the word vanity 38 times in the whole of that book. And what it means is empty, futile, a vapour, like something that vanishes really quickly and leaves nothing behind. Some described as a futile life, like a blister that's on top of a tumour that has a boil on the top. Nice. You can actually feel that, can't you? A blister on top of a tumour on top of a boil. That isn't a place where we should be when we have the Lord in our lives. But here we find Solomon extremely cynical. And the English dictionary definition of a cynic is this: someone with little faith in human sincerity and goodness. You've lost your faith in the goodness of people. You've lost your ideal that people can actually be good at times. It's the person, and I'm sure we all know one, that never sees the good in anything at all. Never sees a good quality in man, yet never fails to see a bad one. It's like a human owl, really, because they're vigilant in the darkness and they can see everything that's dark and black and bleak, but they are blind to the light. And he puts all human classes into two sections: the openly bad and the secretly bad, because he's got no thought that no one can do any good thing unless they are doing it for a purely selfish motive and to get a profit. Now, we are all cynics at times. We all look at things that are going around us in the world. We look at other churches, we look at other things that are happening, and we can become extremely cynical. Various circumstances come into our lives that make us so. But you can tell a cynic immediately, because if you go up to him and you say, do you know, so-and-so's a really good person. Have you ever met him? And their answer will be, well, he looks like he's a good person, but you don't really know him. What he's like behind closed doors, when the door's shut and you don't see him, you don't really know what he's going to be like, do you? Or it's the type of person that when you're nice to them, they immediately go, what do you want? What are you after? Why are you saying those things to me? There must be some ulterior motive why you're asking. You see, a cynic doesn't trust. Actually, they don't trust. For the cynic, a trusting person is a person that has faith not just in God, but in anything. And it's not trusting. It's actually naive and foolish. And the likelihood is that the minute you put your trust in someone, something, you're going to get hurt. And that's silly. And that's not what I'm going to do. So my question to you this morning is it possible to be a Christian and be a cynic? Someone who's not just lost his faith in human goodness, but has also lost his faith in God. Now, I don't mean that you've become an atheist, that you don't believe in God anymore, or that you become an agnostic, but that you feel that actually God has no good for you. And while he might have blessings for other people, you feel that there's nothing that God can offer you. The experiences of your past have just caused you to anticipate that the future will let you down just as much. So is it possible to be a Christian and a cynic? Well, in the Old Testament context of the book of Ecclesiastes, and through our Bible study on Monday nights, as we've looked at Hosea, you can see it's possible to once have had a faith in God and to lose that faith. As you read through the 12 chapters in Ecclesiastes, you'll find that this person calls himself the preacher. Now, I don't know about you, but if I thought that I was coming to listen to the preacher give a message like that every single week, I don't think I'd be coming after week 2. It's a depressing message. And so he's preaching, but it's not a message of hope. It is not a message of promise. It's not something that would encourage us, that would exhort us, that would comfort us. It's a cry of hopelessness, of emptiness and despair. And he concludes over and over again that everything in life that he has seen, even in the life of his religion that he has enjoyed, is vanity of vanities. All is vanity. Nothing is worth anything. And so his conclusion is that there is nothing new under the sun. Now, I know we can say, well, yeah, you're right in a sense there, Solomon. But what he means is in this absolutely pessimistic, cynical sense, that there is nothing new. There's nothing to look forward to. It's all going to be pain and trouble and anxiety and distress. And it's all going to go round in this vicious cycle and we can't get out of it. And everyone's got to experience it. And you can never get out of it until you die. And in fact, his conclusion in this book is, it's better to be dead. His question isn't to ask, is there life after death? But the question he's asking is there actually a life before death? Is there a life to be enjoyed? And so my question is, are you facing this forthcoming new church year with a sneer? Do you think it ain't going to happen? Do you think nothing's going to change? Is that where you are? How did he become this cynical? What on earth did he get? Or where on earth did he come through to be this cynical? You weren't born a cynic. You can't be born a cynic. And he wasn't ignorant. He was highly educated. And if we realise that it was, and we acknowledge that it was Solomon who wrote the book, we realise that he was a man who asked for God's wisdom. And God gave him that wisdom. So this is not someone that's stupid or crazy or ignorant. Neither is it someone who says a statement just to shock someone and get a reaction. We've seen those people. Friends who make statements about life or about God just to get a reaction. But that's not the spirit of the author. He is a man who has known God and who knows God's word. And this is a man before us this morning who is genuinely questioning the great issues of life. And I'm sure that every single one of us can put our hands up and say that at some point we have questioned the great issues of life. I have. And in fact, as you look through the Bible, you will see that there are several men of God who have done exactly that. Have found themselves in a valley of doubt and a valley of despair so often. And as one famous preacher said, doubt the man that never doubts. We find in Kings Elijah, the greatest prophet of the Old Testament. And what's he doing? Well, he's already been up the mountain. He's thrown down the gauntlet to the prophets of Baal to the king and to the queen, and he has had an absolutely amazing spiritual triumph and victory. The Lord answered his prayers and consumed the whole of the sacrifice. And he's coming down from that mountain after invoking the fire from heaven in answer to his prayer of faith. And he hears that Jezebel wants his head on the slab. What does he do in the face of a woman's wrath? Like every wise man, he runs. He runs and he runs and he runs and he runs away from the face of life's extremities, and he finds himself under a juniper tree. That's a juniper tree. To cast himself beneath, and in a cry of, well, you can only call it suicide really, is, Lord, take me now, kill me, take my life, I don't want to live again. I've heard what Jezebel's got planned. I think you might do it slightly better and less painfully, so just take me now, please. Then if you look at his counterpart in the New Testament, you find John the Baptist, his spiritual descendant, if you like. And after pointing the way to the Lamb of God, who could take away the sins of the world, he was a forerunner of the Messiah, preparing the way, making straight the path, a servant sent from Jehovah. And after doing, he's locked up in the prison for calling the king an adulterer. And he finds himself lying on the wet, cold ground of this prison cell. And he begins to think, has my ministry been a waste? Have I been pointing towards the wrong one? He was human. And a lot of people say, oh, I don't think John the Baptist could possibly think that way. But he asks the questions of his disciples when they come to see him. Is it the one? He has that glimmer of a doubt. He doubted, and he passed through such a dark valley of despair and doubt and depression. But what we have here in this preacher in Ecclesiastes is even worse actually than those two types of depression, because this isn't something that just blows past, a passing bout of the blues as they call it, because we all get those from time to time. But this seemed to be an ingrained cynicism that affected the whole of his life. Everything that he had known and enjoyed before, it was destroying him. Absolutely destroying him. So how did he become cynical? Well, actually, we don't really know. But all I know is that some people become cynical because of a great disappointment. They've been embittered because they haven't got where they wanted in life. They haven't achieved what they wanted or what they've longed for. They've never got their dream. And because of that, they resent life and they resent God for not actually giving them what they thought was their right and their fairy tale dream. But as we look at Solomon in this book, we can't say that about him at all. We don't see that. We see the exact opposite. Anything he wanted, he seemed to get. Whatever his hand touched, it seemed to have that Midas touch. He was the richest, most wealthiest, the most beautiful king in existence. So that could be the reason why you're cynical today, but it certainly wasn't Solomon's reason. Some of us get cynical because of suffering in our lives. Not disappointment, but suffering. Job, if you look at him in his book, you look at what he suffered. He suffered the loss of his family, he suffered the loss of his business, he suffered his farm, his cattle, all his wealth, everything went. But when Satan touched his body and he began to get ill and experience pain, it was then that he became a little bit cynical and he started to ask the questions. Why? Why? And even he cursed the day that he'd been born. I wonder why you may be cynical today. Why was this preacher cynical? Well, I'll tell you that his were none of those two reasons that I've given. But you see from these chapters that in the whole laboratory of life he finds that the only reasonable position possible to him is a cynic. It's the only way he can be, and it's the only conclusion as he looked into life. Now can I say, actually, he's right. He's absolutely right. And I don't know if that shocks you or surprises you this morning, but he's right for one reason. Because Solomon was looking at a life without God. Solomon was looking at a life completely and totally without God in the equation. Being without God means naturally being without hope. Are you like that this morning? I have to confess that there are times when I get like that. I get like that, where I don't see any hope. But my trust is not in what I see. My trust is in what I know, and in what I believe, and in my faith in the Lord to see me through. Martin Luther was known actually for having bouts of depression and for going in real big lows. And one day his wife came into the kitchen. She was dressed from head to foot in black. And he said to her, "Who's dead?" And she turned to him and she said, "God's dead." And he went, "What are you talking about, woman? What are you talking about? God is not dead. How can God be dead? God is not dead." And the reply to him was, "Then why are you living as if he was?" Sometimes the look on our face, sometimes the things that we do, make us appear to those around us like our God is dead. But he's not, and he is very much on the throne. How did the writer become so cynical? He left God out of the whole picture. God was not in the equation. So here's the next question. What things did he say were vanity because of his cynicism? Well, I'd encourage you to read the book if you're not going to depress yourself and go and run off under a juniper tree and cry, "Lord, kill me now." He concluded actually that the universe was vanity. I don't know about you, but on a starry night, I love looking out the windows and seeing all those stars. And I marvel at the fact that the Lord placed every single one of them by precision in that place in the universe. He knows every single star by its name. And he knows you and me by ours too. And that name that he knows us by isn't Christine. It's by a child of God. It's by a son of daughter of the King. That's the name, that's the title that we have. How can you possibly look at creation? How can you possibly look at the stars in the sky and come to the conclusion that there is nothing there, that there is nothing to thrill, that there is nothing to excite? That's when, if you don't have Christ in your view, when you look into the future, you won't see anything beautiful in the creation around you. Heaven above is dark, earth around is dead. Everything is death and destruction because Christless eyes don't see life anywhere else. There was only vanity in the universe to him. There's only vanity and pleasure to him. And boy, did he give himself the task of enjoying every single pleasure in this life that there was. He had the wealth and the resources to exhaust every single lust and passion that came across him. But yet we read in this book that he returns from all his adventures empty. And at the end of it all, he stands empty, hopeless, and dissatisfied. All is vanity. Oh, that our pleasure-mad society would realise that. How many believers are harbouring on to materialism and things of this world? They're seeking after them and searching after them and holding on to them like they are their most valued possession. But it's not true. This treasure that I hold, more than finest gold, it is you, Jesus. It is you. He reached the top of the ladder. He had every possession. He had all the wine, the women, the song, if you like. He could enjoy it. Yet at the end of it all, when he'd reached what he felt was the top of the ladder and found that there was nothing there, he became a builder. He constructed palaces and beautiful cities and changed landscapes into gardens and amassed a great fortune of wealth. But he still said, vanity of all vanities, everything is futile. It's empty. He was the wisest of them all. But yet he concludes that even wisdom, the wise man at times is worse off than the fool. Because the wise man knows more. He therefore suffered more because of his knowledge. Therefore he concludes that it's better to be a happy fool than a miserable wise man. That makes me smile. Do you get his reasoning? The saying puts it very well. Where ignorance is bliss, it's folly to be wise. We always quote the first bit. We always say, well, ignorance is bliss. But folly to be wise. That's what he said. And then he went further and said, wisdom only means anything when it's used. And it's only useful when it's used. And he tells a story about a poor man who saves his home city and not a single person appreciates him. And so then he comes to the conclusion and asks the question, how dies a wise man? How does a wise man die? What is the point of being so wise? If you're wise and you use your wisdom, nobody appreciates it. So how does a wise man die? Even as a fool, he says. Both of them die exactly the same. And so he's got no faith in anything. No faith in the universe, no faith in pleasure, no faith in his achievements, no faith in his wisdom. And he was losing his faith in God. And he had long ago lost all faith in man. Makes me smile a little bit when you read what he actually says about man. He says that there might be one good man in 1,000. Okay, all right, okay. Got to take her. One good man in 1,000, but I'm really sorry. It says, as for a good woman, they don't exist. Whoa. Men, we're not only uniformly bad, but he goes a step further and he says that they're doomed to stay that way. He says the crooked can never be made straight. And I think this is possibly one of the most cynical statements that Solomon makes in the whole book. And it's the most hopeless thing that it says, and it's this, that man's in trouble and he can't get out of trouble. And if you believe that, as you're entering a new year, that you're in trouble and that not even God can get you out of trouble, then you've really become cynical. Because God can. He might not immediately pick you up out of your circumstances and remove you over there, but what he's promised is to be with you through them. And he has promised to give you the strength to get through them, and he has promised to never give you something more than you can handle. So if you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, God thinks you can deal with it. God thinks that you can deal with it. Man can't get himself out of trouble, but God can. And that's the message of the gospel. And the Christian hope is this. Yes, man is depraved. Yes, man is a sinner. But hallelujah, Christ came to save sinners. The next question, what did his cynicism do to him? We need to listen to this really carefully, because it's a little bit of a stealth process. A little bit like the Hosea thing, where it's slow creep away. it can happen to you moment by moment, step by step. And the steps sometimes are so small that you don't always realise that it's happening. What did it do? Well, the first thing it did is that it killed all sense of responsibility. He had all the wealth, he had all the health, he had all the knowledge and all the wisdom, he had the vast abilities to do whatever he could with that wisdom and knowledge that he had. But he had no sense of responsibility to anyone else. He was a moral and spiritual dwarf. Why? Because he thought it was all pointless. He didn't have God in his sight, and because God wasn't there, overseeing and overlooking everything he was doing, he felt that he had no responsibility to God or to himself. It also paralysed him in his care towards other people. Not only did it affect his responsibility, but it affected his responsibility towards others. He could have helped them, but he thought to himself, why should I help them? What good will it do if I get them out of this hole and fix them this time? They'll need another helping hand in a few weeks' time. So what is the point? That's what life's like. It's just pointless. It's pointless to help anyone. It's pointless to have a responsibility towards God. In other words, it's every man for himself. That was his motto, survival of the fittest, and so there was no care towards others. And then thirdly, it made him miserable. And I think that's quite an obvious statement, but it made him miserable. Do you know what we've got today, even amongst Christians? People who actually don't have any responsibility towards the church or towards God. We have Christians who don't have any sense of love towards other fellow believers. And then you've got Christians who, I have to say, are just plain miserable. Cynicism makes you miserable. It takes the bloom and the beauty out of life. And this man got to the stage in his life where he said that the only one man that I can congratulate in humanity, in the existence and the face of earth, is the man that is dead. Congratulations. He's wonderful, isn't he? So I'm glad you're not all kind of like running out to the back to get a knife or anything like that. But the man that is dead deserves all the congratulations. The pat on the back. In fact, even better than that, he says, better than the man that is dead is the man that's never even been born. Is life worth living? How do you like that for an attitude? And he concludes the matter by saying, I hated life. I hated life. Life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and full of nothing. And it's if he seems to say, eat, drink and be merry because tomorrow you die. In other words, the best thing to do is to just get drunk and forget all about it. But the thing is, if I knew that there was no God, that is probably exactly where I would be. Because there is no hope and there is no point without God. The thing that makes the difference is having God in your sight. Because if we don't have him, then we are of all men miserable. There's a story told of a man who was once chased by this, it's a fake, false story, by a fierce beast, and he was running down this road as fast as he could to get away from this horrible monster, and he saw a well, so he jumped down the well, and he was sort of trying to scramble his way down the side of the wall of this well, and when he realised at the bottom of this well was this massive big dragon. So he kind of scrambled his way a little back up, and there's this tiny little plant clinging on for dear life at the side of this well. So he clings hold of this plant, and he's looking up at this fierce beast, and he's looking down at this terrible, terrible dragon. And two little mice run out from the wall and come along and start to eat the plant. And he's holding on, and he's thinking, what am I going to do? I'm really thirsty. I'm really hungry. There's a horrible thing above me. There's a terrible thing below me. And now these two things are eating the only thing that I'm clinging hold of. And what he does is he sees drops of dew on the leaves of this plant and he starts to lick them off. Well, I might as well make the best of a solution, because at least it quenches my thirst for a little while. And sometimes that is what happens. We try to hold on to something that gives us a little bit of satisfaction, that gives us a little bit of something, but it is pointless. Because if we can't see through the eyes of the Lord, if we can't put God in the picture, then we are miserable. Friday night, most people out on the town, forgetting their sorrows, drinking their worries away, until they suddenly realise they've no money left and they've got to survive another several weeks. But I'll do it anyway. I'll do it anyway because it's easier. My last question, because I think you all need to hear this, is how did he escape his cynicism? I've painted a very bleak picture. But here's a message for this new year. This man, near the end of the book, if you turn to it in chapter 12, seems to have come to a discovery of God again. Because he discovers God. Through that discovery, his whole attitude towards life changed. Now, if I can just be a little bit personal for a moment, because I'm speaking from my own heart here. If we took some believers, some people from here, and we took some people from outside who didn't know Jesus at all, and we stood them side by side, yes, you could identify them, you could say, yes, they are changed, they have been saved, Jesus is their saviour. I don't dispute that. And the other side are lost and going to a Christless eternity. But I wonder if we'd actually notice anything different about them, about their attitude, about what they talk about what they see, about where their hope is. Or would there be no difference at all? The only explanation for not seeing what you should be able to see is if you've taken God out of your picture and he is not in your view. The discovery of God, the old things, were passed away for Solomon, and behold, all things have become new. If I can give you 3 things to destroy these the opposites really of these destructive influences in his life. The discovery of God meant that he came to possess a new sense of duty. God was there. There was a God to answer, there was a God to serve, there was a God that was before him every single place that he went. He changed his focus and put God slap bang in the middle of it all. As you read through the last couple of chapters of the book, you find that he says, I ought, I ought, I ought, I owe, I owe, I owe. That's rather a lot, and that's a sentiment. But he closes his book with one of the most majestic sentences I've ever read. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God. We heard about fearing God last week. Fear God and keep his commandments, for that is the whole duty of man. And if you're looking back to the Old Testament list of 10 commandments, you're looking at the wrong ones. Because Jesus surpassed those. They're just to chase us to the cross. But Jesus' 2 commandments were to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and your neighbour as yourself. There is a God, and that God, our God, is the only answer to this life. He's got to be served. He's got to be obeyed. We must have a sense of duty. Secondly, he came to realise his sense of responsibility. It says in chapter 11, verse 9, "Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in your days of your youth, and walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes. But know that for all these things God will bring you to judgment." We are answerable. We are answerable to God. We are responsible to God. It doesn't mean that you can't enjoy yourself. It doesn't mean that you have to walk around with a miserable face and wear black. God is not dead. But in all of our pleasures, we need to remember that we have a responsibility to him. That at the end of it all, after all the realization that all he'd enjoyed and thought was useful, he shows us how to avoid the tragic mistakes that he made. And let me tell you that we don't have to go down this road of Solomon's. We don't have to go down this road to find it out. He left us the answer in chapter 12, verse 1. "Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them." Remember. It is keeping our focus on Jesus, keeping our focus on God. And here's the answer how not to have an absolutely miserable new year. I know that there may be things that will happen to you that might cause you to be sad, but let's not become cynical. How do I not become cynical when everything is going wrong in my life and in this world as I look around? Remember now your Creator. This is what he forgot, that there was a Creator, that there was someone holding the whole thing in his hands. Can I ask, as we just close this meeting, what are you remembering now that fills your potential new year with cynicism? What has happened to you over this past 12 months that makes you think that nothing good is held for you in this forthcoming year? I'll take you back to 1 Kings 19 and verses 1 to 3. And it's Elijah again. And remember what's happened. He's run away and he's thrown himself under the juniper tree and asked God to kill him now. But in verse 1 it says this, "And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and all how he had slain all the prophets with the sword, what a mighty man of God he was. And then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, So let the gods do to me, and more also, if I don't make your life as one of them by tomorrow." In other words, Elijah, I'm going to kill you. But then in verse 3 it says, "And when he saw that," not hear it, when he saw it, he got a mental picture of what that could possibly be. And it scared him. It means it filled his gaze. It filled his vision. Elijah got the picture. He got the picture that she was after his life. And he came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and he left his servant there, and he went a few days on, and he cast himself before the Lord, and he says, "Please, I'm not any better than my fathers, let me die." What happened? He had heard, but his vision had been filled. He'd got a picture of his circumstances rather than a vision of God. If we see the wonder of God, if we remember our Creator in awe and wonder, it will do great things for us. Forever we need to keep the Lord in our view. As we're coming forward into this new year, there's nothing new under the sun. But we are all new creatures in Christ Jesus. The old has passed away, and behold, all things have become new, because you are now not seeing with your carnal eyes. You are looking through spiritual eyes and seeing what the Lord is seeing. You're seeing what the Lord is doing. And you can walk forward into that knowing that not only do you have the armor of God in front of you, but God has got your back. God has got your back. I'm going to finish with this thing because John 10 actually says it all. And it's actually, you can sigh a sigh of relief when I've said it. Because Jesus said, I have come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. Or Paul in Corinthians 15:58 telling us that we don't labour in vain. Life is not in vain if it's according to the will of God. Life is God's gift to us. And he wants us to enjoy it and to use it for his glory. So instead of looking and complaining about what you don't have, start giving thanks for what you do. And start that tonight at our service at 6 o'clock, giving thanks for what you do have. If you are here this morning and if you have never trusted Jesus as your Saviour, then if you needed to read a book that would drive you to that point, then Ecclesiastes is the one. Why? Because no matter how much wealth, no matter how healthy you are, no matter your education, no matter what your prestige is, life without God is futile. Life without God is empty. Life without God is pointless. And you are only chasing after the wind if you expect to find satisfaction and fulfillment in the things of this world. Life with Jesus is a daily adventure that builds character and enables you to serve others to the glory of God. That's the life that he wants for you. So can you cast aside the past and the negatives? Can you rejoice in the positives of this past year and look forward to that glorious hope, to that future of what he has planned for here, but for you and for your part in the whole of that vision? Can we just pray? Maybe this morning you're here and something has struck a chord with you and you feel that you have left God out of the picture completely. Well, if you are finding or telling yourself that you are finding satisfaction in this world, then I think that you are deceiving yourself. It might feel like it, but it's not true satisfaction, and you're being completely duped. Maybe you're here and some of your circumstances and situations have caused you to lose heart, to lose faith in God. Well, we all need to take a thought this morning. And it's as an old king once said, to put our hands into the hand of the Lord and to trust him. Will we do that today? Will we trust him completely today? Lord, as we remember those two disciples of yours that were walking along the road to Emmaus, Lord, and we thought about them already, Lord. We've heard so much about them at Cafe Church and how you spoke to them, Lord, and you revealed yourself through the Old Testament scriptures, Lord. They were downcast. They were dejected on the journey, like we are sometimes on our journey. And they thought that everything was dead, and all their dreams, all their ambitions. And they maybe were a little bit like Solomon, and becoming very cynical about what they'd seen, and what they'd heard, and what they'd thought, and the hopes that they'd had and put in you. And they'd seen them all dashed, Lord, because they thought that you'd gone. They thought that you'd gone. But Lord, you drew them close. You came right where they were. You came and met them on that road in their dejection. And that's exactly what you can do to us this morning. You can meet us right where you are. And you can minister to us, and you can speak to us, Lord, about who you are. And you can reveal through the scriptures, Lord, who you are. And you can lift us up, and you can encourage us to take those steps and those leaps of faith because of who you are, Lord, and nothing to do with ourselves. Lord, I pray that you will make the difference for all of us this forthcoming new year, and from this day on, for your glory, Lord. Amen.